Today we're going to talk about travel and espresso. Espresso is always good, but if you're traveling and you bring your own espresso maker and pull a really good shot, then it's just pure magic. So if you also feel that way, then you're definitely going to be interested in how this little guy here, the Leverpresso V4, is going to perform. And as you might notice here, I'm in a slightly unfamiliar setting. I'm actually in an Airbnb, and I feel like if you really want to review a travel espresso maker, I think you should do it while you're traveling. So that's why things are a little bit unusual here. If you've already been following my channel for a while, you know I've been testing a lot of these small espresso gadgets, but I think we might have one of the contenders for that best portable espresso maker category right here. So it's going to be fun to dive into it and tell you about the pros and cons. So the Leverpresso is made by a South Korean brand called HUGH. It's not the biggest company in the world, that's at least the sense I'm getting, but they've been around for a few years now, and they also have a more premium espresso maker called the Leverpresso Pro, which I reviewed a few years back. I was really impressed by it, but it's also a quite expensive espresso maker. So this one here is more like the standard kind of budget version. I think the retail price is around 120, 130 US dollars. So for an espresso maker, it's pretty affordable. This is version 4, so that means there's also been a version 1, 2 and 3. And I guess in a few years, that's many versions to have, so that probably meant that there were some problems with the first units. Actually, I'm not that surprised that there have been some problems with breaking before, because manual espresso is something that can put a lot of stress on the units. Especially if they're made of plastic, they are quite prone to breaking. If you want to pull a shot at around 7 to 9 bars, so that's typical espresso pressure, then that means that you have to put quite a lot of force on a little device like this. But the really big problem is that if you're grinding too fine, then your instinct is probably just to keep pressing until you see some coffee coming out here. And let's say you're suddenly producing 12 to 15 bars, you're putting maybe almost body weight on a little device like this. Yeah, then there's going to be some problems down the line, and that's also what we see with other manual espresso makers. There's no pressure gauge with this unit here, and for that reason it's quite easy to fall in that trap where you're just going finer and finer, and actually you're going way beyond 9 bars. So HUGH has introduced this new kind of plastic, the super plastic. On the old Leverpresso, the body was actually transparent, which was pretty cool, but I'm happy to have a more sturdy and strong version. The Leverpresso V4 also comes with a range of accessories. There's this combined dosing cup and tamper. Then there's this attachment you can add to the basket to prevent spraying. It's really cool that it's transparent, because then you can get some of that espresso porn while avoiding making a mess. This one is not really needed if you're brewing into a travel cup, but you can also get a special stand for home brewing, and in that case it could be handy. Overall, I will say that the stand is a nice touch for many different reasons if you want to use the Leverpresso a bit more frequently at home. It's a bit more secure, and that means you can also use a scale if you're brewing with it. The Leverpresso V4 also comes with these rubber inserts here that you place on top of the brewing chamber, and that's supposed to help with any water splashing out and to retain more heat inside the brewing chamber. The basket is a 51mm real espresso basket. HUGH also makes another 51mm basket with IMS, which is a real high-grade precision basket, but I will say this one here is also really good. Actually, I'm able to brew with the same kind of grind size that I am with the HUGH basket, so actually there's not much difference in real life. The only difference I really notice is that the pucks knock out more easily of the HUGH IMS basket. The grounds has a tendency to stick more to the bottom of this basket here. So the way the Leverpresso works is that you fill up this brew chamber here, and then as you lift the arms, water is actually running down into the water reservoir, and then when you press down again, the pressure is built up in the brew chamber. Of course, you also need to place this dispersion screen here in the brewer, so the water will be applied evenly, and then you have the basket, plug it into place, and then that's basically it. It's a pretty simple, pretty straightforward way of operating a manual espresso maker. And then if you're on the road, then you brew into your cup here. If If you're at home, then you can place it into this special stand that HUGH is also producing. I think it's sold for around $40 US. But now let's just brew a shot and then you can really see how it works. So first I'm going to start with preheating the device. Preheating is a really important step with manual espresso makers, because if you don't do it, then you tend to get slightly sour shots. So I would definitely recommend, no matter the roast degree, at least preheat once. And if you're brewing roasts that are not super dark, then maybe even preheat twice. And now, while the brewer is preheating, it's also a good time to tell you about this video sponsor, which is ZBiotics. So, as you already know, I'm a big coffee geek, but what you probably didn't know is that I also really enjoy a nice cocktail or a super hobby IPA. And while I love a good evening out, I equally love waking up the next day feeling refreshed and ready to tackle all the tasks ahead of me. And sometimes as I'm getting older, I find that a strong shot of espresso is not quite enough just to get me in the zone. So if you're also like that, then you might want to consider ZBiotics. ZBiotics is actually the world's first genetically engineered probiotic, which I know sounds wild. It was invented by PhD scientists to tackle rough mornings after drinking. When you drink, alcohol gets converted into a toxic byproduct in the gut. It's this byproduct, not dehydration, that's to blame for your rough next day. ZBiotics produces an enzyme to break this byproduct down. Just remember to drink this probiotic before drinking alcohol, then drink responsibly and get a good night's sleep, and then you'll feel your best tomorrow. If you have a busy work life and you also have a busy social schedule coming up in the summertime, then stock up on some pre-alcohol. If you're 21 or over and want to try it for yourself, then head to zbiotics.com/coffeechronicler or scan the QR code to get 15% off your first order with the code coffeechronicler. Big thanks to ZBiotics for sponsoring this video, and now let's get back and brew some espresso. So since I don't have any distribution tools, I'm just going to use the basket and the catch cup from my grinder as a sort of blind shaker. Distribute the grounds and then give it a tamp. Then get rid of the preheat water, just empty it out. And then add the basket to the basket holder, screw it in, and then tear the scale so you know how much you're brewing. Add your brew water, and it should be right off boil. Then lift up the levers and let the water flow into the brew chamber. And you can just wiggle it a little bit to ensure it all goes in. And then you just press down slowly. And when you feel a lot of resistance, then just back off a little bit. Wait for the first few drops. And that means you have saturated the whole puck. And then you start applying even more pressure. Just keep it steady. Increase the pressure. And now you have a good flow. So keep an eye on the volume in the cup, because we don't have a scale, so we're just going to eyeball it. I think that's about it now. I'm going to back off. And now just separate the brewer and the cup. It might still drip a little bit, so find somewhere you can put it so you don't make a mess. Now you take your cup and put it on your scale if you want to calculate the extraction yield. And let's have a taste. Yeah, it is pretty solid. I also calculated the extraction yield and it's just above 20%, so definitely real espresso. Now let's talk about some of the things that are not so great with the Leverpresso, because there are a couple of things that I think could be improved. First of all, this combined dosing cup and tamper. I don't think it has the best fit. There's always a little gap on the side, so it would have been nice if it was a little bit more of a precision engineered thing. Also, these two rubber sleeves here, I appreciate that they've made them and they kind of did an effort to insulate the brew chamber more, but I don't think it's the best solution. A silicone sleeve would probably have been better. Then the brewer wouldn't feel that hot as well after you've been brewing. With this setup here, it's very difficult to fill up the brewer because these ones are black and the brew chamber is also black, so it's hard to see your fill line, and it's easy to accidentally overfill the brew chamber, and then you're gonna end up with water spraying out along the side. Now the next thing I will say is that it also struggles a little bit with these light to medium roasts. I had one back here on this trip and I wasn't able to get like really good shots out of it. I could always detect a little bit of that kind of slightly too cold brew temperature to be extracted properly. And I think this is something that is quite typical with manual espresso makers. So I'm not going to really blame the Leverpresso for this. On the flip side, however, I will say that you can make really good allonges with the Leverpresso. It's a quite cool technique, because after you pressed it down the first time, then you can add water to the brew head again, lift up your arms, and then you can pull the rest out. And that will really mitigate the sourness. So I had some really tasty lungos at a 1:6 ratio. So it's kind of cool that it has this option. The last downside is that you can't install a pressure gauge in this one here. The Leverpresso Pro has a pressure gauge. It's very nice to use. And now the biggest competitors in this price class here, which is the HUGH Picopresso, it has a pressure gauge add-on that you can install, which makes it a lot more cool. The same thing with the Flare Neo Flex. They're relaunching it, and it's going to come with a pressure gauge by default. So the fact that the two biggest rivals in the same price class offers this and the Leverpresso V4 doesn't is a little bit of a downside. But overall, I will say that HUGH has done a really good job with the Leverpresso V4 as a kind of combined travel coffee maker, and one that you can also use as a daily driver at home, especially if you get that external stand, which is going to make it a lot nicer to use. Yeah, I think it's a quite solid product. I wouldn't say that it's better than the HUGH Picopresso and the Flare Neo Flex, but it's probably a better compromise between a travel coffee maker and something that you can use every day at home. So in that sense, I think it's a quite successful product. If you want to see how it compares to the bigger Leverpresso Pro model, then I'll put that video right here, and then you can just click it, and then I'll see you over there.